Ruth was 58 years old, and after 33 years of marriage, her husband divorced her for the woman he had been seeing for years. He kept the house, the savings, and when all that was left was her father's gas station, rotting, forgotten, and buried in debt, his lawyers hadn't bothered to fight for it. But Ruth noticed something. That gas station was the only thing her father had never talked about and never let anyone touch. So she did something her husband would never understand. She moved in. She told them she had nothing left. But when she pried open the panel behind the register, everything changed. After the divorce, Ruth drove up Route 11 and arrived at Macklin Gas and Service. The station was a small cinder block building with a flat roof and rusted, locked gas pumps frozen on prices from another decade. As she sorted through the property, she unexpectedly opened a lockbox and uncovered a set of keys, the original deed, and her father's hidden legacy. She discovered envelopes containing thank you notes and a locked green filing cabinet documenting acts of generosity Earl had never mentioned. Furthermore, she discovered a secret, well-kept repair bay where Earl's tools were still meticulously organized on a pegboard. Getting the station running was an immense gamble. The underground tanks needed inspection, and most fuel companies hung up on her. Fortunately, a company owner named Grady installed new pump heads because Earl had once kept his trucks running for a discount. Life at the station was a struggle, but people Earl had secretly helped began returning to repay the favor. Jesse, a mechanic, stayed to work after realizing Earl had anonymously paid for his grandmother's surgery, and a retired attorney offered her services because Earl had funded her own daughter's medical care. Through this community, Ruth slowly found herself again. Just as she built something of her own, Dennis returned. He manipulated their daughter Connie and used his lawyers to demand a share of the station, claiming a highway expansion made it valuable. Instead of folding, Ruth stood up to protect her property legally. In court, the judge reviewed the documents and asked for a rebuttal, but Dennis's lawyer had nothing substantial. The judge denied the motion, ruling the property was never marital. Outside the courthouse, a defeated Dennis asked when she had become this person. Looking at the man who understood cost but missed true value, Ruth reclaimed her self-esteem and embraced her new life.
Tonight, I am sitting with Ruth Macklin, who is 58 years old, was married for 33 years, and came in this evening to tell me what she did after her husband took the house and left her with the one place nobody else wanted. The folded deed on the table between us is hers. It is the deed to Macklin Gas and Service, her father's old gas station on Route 11, just below the Blue Ridge.
That is mine. For a while, I could not even look at it.
Why not?
Because that piece of paper was all they left me. I walked out of that courtroom at 58 years old with a cardboard box in my arms, an old pickup truck that coughed before it started, and a deed nobody in that room wanted. Dennis got the house. He got the accounts. He got the furniture we had picked out together. The dining room table where Connie used to do her homework. The bedroom set I had dusted for more than 30 years. And I got my father's gas station, Macklin Gas and Service, a place Dennis's attorney described like a burden, old pumps, cracked pavement, a roof that needed work. They said it was worth almost nothing. At the time, I believed them. That is the part I am not proud of. I did not walk out thinking, this is my new beginning. I walked out thinking, do not drop the box. That was all I could manage.
What was the first thought that went through your mind?
I do not think I had one complete thought. I remember the weight of the box more than the judge's voice. One corner kept pressing into my ribs because I was holding it too tight. I remember thinking that if I cried, I would not be able to carry it to the truck. The strange thing about humiliation is that it does not always feel hot. Sometimes it feels empty, like somebody has turned all the sound down in your body. Dennis stood a few feet away from me, talking to his attorney. He did not look shaken. He did not look cruel in any loud way. He looked finished, like a man who had closed a file. That hurt more than if he had yelled. After 33 years, I had become paperwork to him.
Was it the house you were grieving?
or the place you thought you still had in that life. The house hurt. I will not pretend it did not. A house holds you in ways you do not notice until someone tells you it is no longer yours. But the deepest cut was hearing Dennis talk about that house as if I had not made a life inside it. He talked about value, equity, accounts, practical division. He talked about everything that could be counted. And I sat there realizing he did not know how to count the years I had given him. The meals, the quiet, the times I swallowed words because I thought peace was more important than being right. By the end of that marriage, I had gotten very good at disappearing politely. That is a hard sentence to say, but it is true.
When Felton pointed where to sign, did you feel like you were signing away property or a version of yourself?
A version of myself. The property was on the papers, the other part was not. Nobody writes down the cost of becoming small. Felton had this polished pen, silver, heavy-looking. He kept sliding papers toward me like we were finishing a business meeting. Sign here, initial there, date on this line. I remember looking at my own signature and thinking it looked timid. That day, my name looked like it was trying not to take up space. And that was when I understood something. I had not wanted to understand. Dennis had not taken my voice all at once. I had handed it over little by little, because it seemed easier. At first it was small things. Where we ate, what we bought, whether my father's station was worth visiting, whether I should call Earl more often. Dennis always had reasons, practical reasons. That was the word he liked, and I wanted to be a reasonable wife. So I bent, then I bent again. After a while, bending starts to look like your natural shape.
When did agreeing become easier than being heard?
Years before I admitted it, there was not one terrible day where I woke up and thought, I have lost myself. It was quieter than that. It happened when I started saying, whatever you think, because I was tired. When I stopped defending things that mattered to me because he could make them sound sentimental or foolish. My father's station was one of those things. To Dennis, it was dirty work, bad investment. Coffee, favors, old pumps, and no real profit. And I did not defend Earl the way I should have. That is one of the griefs I carried out of that courtroom. Not only what Dennis had done, what I had allowed myself to stop saying.
Were you angry at Dennis first, or angry at yourself for having stayed silent so long?
Dennis first. I was angry he could stand there so calm after pulling apart a whole life. I was angry he could fight for the house, the savings, the investments, the comfortable pieces, and then act generous because he left me a broken-down gas station in the mountains. I was angry that the thing with my father's name on it had been treated like trash. But driving away, the anger turned inward. That was harder. Because I kept asking myself, when did you start believing him? When did I start believing that the work my father did was small? When did I start believing that I needed Dennis to tell me what was worth keeping? Those questions sat beside me in that old truck. The deed was in the box on the passenger seat. I did not touch it for the first hour.
Did you go to the station with a plan?
No. I had a place. That was all. A little money, a truck that did not like hills, and a deed to a building nobody had wanted. I thought I might sell it. Maybe get enough to rent something small. Start again quietly somewhere Dennis would not have to see me, and I would not have to see what he kept. But as I drove up toward the mountains, the road began to look familiar. Not comforting yet. And mile by mile, the life I thought was over started. I did not know that yet. I only knew the sun was going down, my hands hurt from gripping the wheel, and the only address left in my name belonged to a dead man. Somewhere past the county line, the road narrowed, and the trees came in close on both sides. I had to lean forward to see around the curves. My back ached from holding myself tight all day. At one sharp turn, the box shifted on the seat, and I put my hand out to steady it without thinking. I did not want anything else to fall.
So I kept driving. When you finally reached your father's old station, what did you see first?
The sign. I saw the sign before I saw the building. Macklin Gas and Service. The letters were still there, but the paint had gone pale from the weather. One side of the sign leaned a little, like it was tired of holding itself up. I pulled into the gravel lot and sat there with the truck running because I could not make myself turn the key off. The pumps looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe everything from childhood does. that when you come back to it wounded. The building had dust on the windows, weeds pushing through the cracks in the pavement. I remember thinking, this is what they left me. Not with hope, not with gratitude, just that sentence.
Did it feel abandoned, or like something was waiting for you?
At first, abandoned. I looked at the old station and saw it through Dennis's eyes before I could see it through my own. That is what happens when someone has judged your life for a long time. Even when they are not standing beside you, their voice gets there first. I sat in the truck listening to the engine idle, and for a moment I thought about turning around. I did not know where I would go, but I thought about it.
What made you get out?
The deed. It was still in the box on the passenger seat. I looked at that folded paper and thought, if this is mine, then I need to at least stand inside it once. It was more like stubbornness. Sometimes you move because falling apart would take more energy. I turned the truck off, took the keys Felton had handed me, and walked to the side door. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the keyring in the gravel. I bent down to pick it up, and my knees made that little sound the knees make when you are not as young as you used to be. I almost laughed. There I was, 58 years old, standing in gravel outside a gas station I did not want, and my knees were the first thing to complain.
When you opened the door, what came back to you?
Before anything else, the smell came back. Old motor oil, dust, wood that had held summer heat for too many years, and underneath it, faint but still there, coffee. My father always had coffee on. People drank it because it was Earl's coffee, and that meant something. When I pushed the door open, it stuck a little at the bottom. I had to use my shoulder. The bell above the door made a weak sound. Not the bright little ring I remembered, but enough that I stopped moving. I had heard that bell 1,000 times as a girl. Men coming in for spark plugs. Women asking if Dad could check a tire. That bell had been ordinary once.
That night, it sounded like a ghost clearing its throat. And then you saw your father's things?
Not all at once. The light switch was where it had always been, just inside the door to the left. My hand found it before my mind did. That surprised me. My body remembered the room better than I did. The lights flickered, then came on in pieces. One bulb near the counter, another over the old shelves. The back corner stayed dim. And then I saw the counter. Same scar across the top, from where a battery had leaked acid when I was 16. Same little wooden stool behind it. Same cash register, though it looked more like a museum piece than anything useful. And beside the register were my father's reading glasses, folded, waiting. That was when the room changed. Because a building can be empty, but glasses are personal.
Glasses say somebody expected to need them again.
When you saw his reading glasses, what did that do to you?
It took the air out of me. I did not cry in the courtroom, but I cried when I saw those glasses. Quietly. Not pretty. Just standing there with one hand on the counter, crying over a pair of glasses Dennis would have thrown in a drawer without thinking. My father had these thick hands, mechanic's hands, but when he picked up those glasses, he did it carefully, like they were fragile. He would slide them low on his nose and squint at receipts, crossword clues, anything with small print. I could see him so clearly for a second that I almost said, "Dad?" That embarrassed me, even alone. But grief does strange things. It makes the past feel one breath away.
Did that room remind you of who you had been before Dennis decided what mattered?
It did, but not gently. That room remembered a Ruth I had neglected. I used to know where everything was in that station. I knew which drawer had fuses, where Dad kept the good flashlight, which pump made a sound before it acted up. I knew how to listen to an engine. The station went very quiet after that. Just the old building settling and my own breathing. I noticed I had stopped breathing normally. I understood that he had seen something I was still hiding from. He heard tired in my voice before I admitted I was tired. I sat there with my finger on that line for a long time. A car passed on the road outside. I heard it and did not move. And then, almost at the bottom, he wrote, where the handwriting had gotten a little shakier. There were a few station notes, something about the coffee pot acting up, ordinary things.
Was there one entry that stopped you completely?
Yes, it was near the back of the notebook. Dennis would not have known how to appraise. People remembered him with their whole faces. That is not a small thing.
a while back without realizing it.
When you found that line, did it feel like he had been waiting for you all that time?
Rich meant able to answer when people needed you. Dennis had the house. He had the accounts and numbers that made him feel safe. My father replaced a water pump in his truck and only charged him for the part. Hank tried to argue. Dad said, "You have 3 calves coming and a wife who looks tired. Pay me when the place quits asking so much of you." Another just said, "Winter coming." I remember sitting very still because I did not understand what I was looking at. It did not read like business. Alternator, tires, groceries, medicine. One line said, "No charge, baby sick." Another said, "Paid for gas, said not to tell husband." With Hank's thermos still there and the morning light coming through dirty windows. What did Hank do? I said I was sorry for not coming sooner. Sorry for letting Dennis make me ashamed of honest work. Sorry for treating the station like something behind me instead of something that had raised me. And then I cried the way I had not cried in court, not neat tears. I cried with my head down on the counter, right beside his glasses.
Did you feel forgiven?
I wanted to. I did not quite know how. I sat there with my fingers on that sentence and I said, "I am sorry, Dad." Not out loud at first, then out loud. Once you say something like that in an empty room, it changes the room.
A while back without realizing it.
When you found that line, did it feel like he had been waiting for you all that time? He wanted me home before I knew I needed a home to return to. My father's love made me see how long I had been away from myself.
The crossword was there too?
Under the glasses. An unfinished crossword from an old newspaper, yellowed at the edges. I think that was the first time I understood that the station had not only been closed, ITE had been interrupted. Standing there, I wondered when I had stopped listening to anything that hurt. Machines, my father, myself. The woman who could change a tire became the woman who waited for Dennis to approve the repair bill. That is not easy to admit, but it is true. Alternator, tires, groceries, medicine. One line said, whole pages of names written in my father's hand. Some had dollar amounts beside them, some had parts listed, and opened the notebook expecting numbers. The first thing I saw was a name, then another name, then another. I pulled out a stack of brittle folders, 2 ledgers, and then a black notebook held closed with a rubber band. I was looking for anything that would tell me what the station still owed, what shape the accounts were in. Yes, it was tucked under the bottom shelf behind the counter, where Dad used to keep old receipt books. Another just said, "Winter coming." I remember sitting very still because I did not understand what I was looking at. It did not read like business. My father used to say, "Machines tell you what hurts if you do not rush them." I had not thought about that sentence in years. It read like people. And for the first time since the divorce hearing, I forgot about Dennis completely. The smallness of the notes. They were not dramatic. My father did not write them like a man keeping score. But inside that station, sitting on my father's stool with his glasses beside me and his journal under my hand, I knew I had not been left with nothing. Confused first, then something larger. I had come there thinking the station was empty, thinking my father had left behind a failing business, and a few old tools. But those pages did not feel empty. They felt crowded.
I did not know what I had been left with yet, but it was not nothing. You said the pages did not feel like business. They felt like people. When you saw name after name, need after need, what broke your heart first?
Outside, the mountain road was dark. The pumps were still dead. The sign was still faded. Nothing had changed if you looked from the outside. He wrote them like a man reminding himself what needed doing. Martha, gas, no charge. Hank, starter, pay later. Widow on Miller Road, groceries. I kept turning pages, and every page had some little piece of somebody's trouble on it.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he treated people the way he treated machines. Carefully, without making a performance out of it. Not a story, not a speech, Just enough words for Earl Macklin to remember where help was needed. He could make kindness look like maintenance. If somebody came in short on money, he did not make them stand there explaining their whole life. If a mother needed groceries and was too proud to say it plainly, he found a way to put something in her car and call it a mistake. He made care feel ordinary.
Was it painful to realize your father had lived a whole life of meaning you had never fully seen?
No. At first I kept trying to make the journal fit into something I already understood. I thought maybe these were unpaid accounts. But then I saw notes that did not make sense as debt. Covered school shoes, paid pharmacy, no receipt, tire replaced before storm. And for a few minutes I believed that was what I was looking at. Loss. Bad bookkeeping. Softness that had cost him. That was Dennis's voice again. Even sitting alone in my father's station, I could hear Dennis saying, "This is why the place never made anything." I sat on that stool with his journal open and kept thinking, how did I not know this? I knew Dad was kind. Everybody knew Earl was kind. In the station, I felt ashamed of what I had failed to value. I thought about all the times Dad called and said, "Quit, come by if you can." The journal did not accuse me. That almost made it worse. And then I realized those pages were not evidence that my father failed as a businessman. They were evidence that he had refused to let people fail alone. I thought about all the times I said maybe next week. I thought about how many next weeks there are before there are none. But I did not know the scale of it. I did not know he had been quietly holding parts of that valley together. In court, I felt humiliated by what Dennis took. And when the door opened, Hank Dawson climbed out slower than I remembered, with a thermos in one hand, unless he changed his mind after 40 years, which he never did. And he was right. They were there. I told him I had not even found where Dad kept the filters. Hank said, "He kept them in the tin above the sink." I opened the door, and he stood there holding that thermos like an offering. He said he saw my truck out front and figured I might not have made coffee yet, and a face that looked like it had been carved by weather. He looked at me through the window first, like he was not sure he should come in. Then he tapped on the glass and said, "You Earl's girl?" Earl's girl. That phrase nearly undid me. Nobody had called me that in years, even though it was about half the valley. But Hank saw the black notebook on the counter. His eyes went to it, then away. He said, "Your daddy kept track of things. That was all." I asked if people owed Dad a lot of money, and Hank looked down at his boots for a long moment.
Did Hank tell you what your father had done for him? Did that change what the word rich meant to you?
Then he said, "Some did. Some didn't. Wasn't always money he was counting." That sentence stayed with me. A little. Men like Hank do not like to confess need. He said Earl helped him through 2 bad winters, and a year when the bank was breathing hard, as he put it. He said Dad never made him feel like charity. If Hank tried to apologize, Dad would say, "Bring me tomatoes when yours come in." That was Earl's way. Did you ask him about the journal? Not right away. I was embarrassed to ask. It felt like I had found something private. He did not erase a person's pride to help them. He gave them a way to stand. Hank told me that once, years before that. Hank said he went home and cried in the barn because Earl had noticed his wife looked tired. Not because he saved money, because somebody noticed. It began to. Dennis believed rich meant protected from needing people. My father seemed to believe.
Was there a moment when the station stopped, feeling like punishment? And then you found the journal?
Sitting at that old counter with Hank drinking bad coffee beside me, I realized my father had left behind a kind of wealth. And no, I do not think my father waited in a bitter way. Earl did not hold people hostage with love. But when I read that line, he had written in pencil, because Earl Macklin did not trust ink for anything that might need correcting. One answer was half filled. Another had been erased so hard the paper was thin. His life had ended, and that puzzle had stayed there waiting for a hand that was not coming back. That made me suspicious. I had been through enough with Dennis to know that can hide a cost. I could not unknow what was in those pages. I could not unknow Hank's face. I could not unknow that line. Sometimes mercy is not a sentence. Sometimes it is an old man making coffee while you fall apart. Because that sounded like Dad. Then Hank said, "No, that is important. I did not know I was going to stay. I did not know I was going to reopen anything. I still had bills." I kept reading, slower this time. And near the back, under a stack of old inspection forms, I found a small lockbox. I still had very little money. I still had no real plan. But I knew I could not call the station worthless anymore. That word was gone. Dennis's word was gone. I could not unknow what was in those pages. I could not unknow Hank's face. I could not unknow that line. Nothing at first. And that was right, he let me cry. Then he stood up, walked to the sink, found the coffee filters exactly where he said they would be, and started making coffee like he had permission from the dead. He did not say, "Do not cry." He just made coffee. It began to. Dennis believed rich meant protected from needing people. My father seemed to believe, and not at first. I searched the desk drawers, the old coffee tin, the hook by the office door. Then I remembered my father's habit. I worked the key free carefully. The tape had dried out and left a faint square mark on the underside of the stool, like a shadow of something that had been held there a long time. I stood up slowly. I held the key in my palm. Not hidden dramatically. Nothing in that station was dramatic. Just tucked away where only someone cleaning carefully would find it. So I looked under the wooden stool. There was a piece of tape there, old and curled at the edges, and a little key stuck to it. It was smaller than I expected. I looked at the lockbox on the desk, then back at the key, then I sat down again. The key fit. Inside the box were papers, a few envelopes, and one letter with my name on it, Ruth. Just my name, in my father's handwriting.
At that point, did you know you were going to stay? What did you do next? Did you have the key?
No, I could not. Not after the journal. Not after I wished she'd come home. I held that letter for a long time. The envelope had yellowed a little. And for the first time, the thought came to me that maybe Dennis had not left me the worst thing. And the corner was soft where it had been handled. I wondered how many times Dad had touched it. I wondered when he wrote it. Maybe he had left me the only thing he did not understand.
When did you finally open Earl's letter?
That afternoon. I carried it around the station for hours first. I cleaned. I placed the letter on the counter, beside the journal, beside the glasses, beside the unfinished crossword. And I knew that when I opened it, I would not be opening a piece of paper. I would be hearing my father tell me what that station was really worth, where his coffee cup had always sat. I swept the front room, found a trash bag, threw away things that were truly ruined, moved dust from one surface to another. I wiped the counter, then stopped because I did not want to wipe away the ring. But every other object became a decision. A receipt, a wrench, a pencil with the eraser worn flat. I was afraid it would forgive me too easily. Kindness can be harder to receive than blame when you already feel guilty. I had come there thinking I might sell the whole place, and suddenly I could not throw away a pencil without wondering if my father had sharpened it. But I knew Dad. He was not likely to leave cruelty behind, and I did not know if I could bear tenderness from the man I had stayed away from. If the letter had said, "You should have come sooner," I would have known what to do with that. I could have punished myself with it. He had written, "Ruth, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the station has found its way back to you." I had to stop at that first sentence, like it had been waiting the same way he had been waiting. He wrote that Dennis was a man who measured things in dollars and called that wisdom. Then I opened the envelope carefully because the paper felt old and soft. My father's handwriting was slower than I remembered, but still his. I sat on his stool. That seemed right. Put his glasses beside me, though I did not need them. I just wanted them there. Not you have inherited it. Not this property is yours now. He wrote it like the place had a will of its own. Men like that often confuse price with value because price is easier to explain. Then he wrote, "Do not let him teach you to look at your own life that way." I read that line 3 times. Maybe more. I did not even realize I had been doing that until my father named it from the grave. My father's letter did not shout at Dennis. It did something stronger. It made Dennis's whole way of seeing the world look small. He told me not to keep the station out of guilt. He knew me well enough to know I might do exactly that. He wrote, "If this place is only a burden to you, sell it and live. I will not haunt you for choosing peace." That made me laugh and cry at the same time, because it sounded exactly like him. He was not asking me to become him. He was not asking me to repay anything. He was giving me permission. That was Earl. He trusted a room to speak if you gave it enough quiet. So I did. Then, a few lines later, he wrote, "But before you decide, sit here one morning with the coffee on. Let the place tell you what it still is." I made another pot of coffee, opened the front door even though no one was coming, and sat behind the counter with the letter in front of me and the journal beside it. For a long time, nothing happened. The pumps were still off. A fly kept hitting the window. Then a woman slowed down on the road outside. She did not stop, just looked. A few minutes later, an older man pulled into the lot, sat there a moment, then drove away. Someone honked as they passed. Not a stranger's honk. A knowing one. I was in the service bay later, holding the red rag, when I saw sunlight come through the high window onto the concrete floor. Dust floating in it. The place looked rough, honestly. It needed repairs everywhere. But for the first time, I did not see it through Dennis's eyes. I saw my father's hands. I saw Hank's face. I saw those names in the journal. I saw the line. The roof still needed work. The pump still needed inspection. I still had very little money. My life was still broken in all the obvious ways. But that sentence gave me back one thing: choice. Saying I am not selling it today was the first decision I had made in a long time.
And when you finally opened it, what else did Earl tell you? What did that sentence change? What did you do next?
And I said out loud, I am not selling it today. Not forever, not some heroic declaration, just today. That was enough. That did not pass through his approval first. I did not know how hungry I was for that feeling until I felt it. Someone left firewood by the back door without knocking. Another person brought better coffee than mine and said Macklin Gas and Service had been my father's name in the world. I did not want it leaning there like an apology. I made a list, found an old legal pad in Dad's desk and wrote down everything that needed doing. Front windows, coffee area. Hank came back later that day with a toolbox and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He did not ask if I had decided. Not in a crowd, one at a time. Darlene brought cleaning rags and a box of canned soup. A man I barely remembered brought paint left over from his porch. Earl would not tolerate weak coffee in this establishment. I laughed at that. I had not laughed much in months. I wanted help, but I did not want to need it. After the divorce, needing anything felt dangerous. Dennis had made me feel foolish for needing, for wanting, for not knowing. So when Hank helped and Darlene brought soup or bathroom, service bay, pump inspection, roof leak, sign. I wrote sign twice because looking at those faded letters bothered me. He looked at the broom in my hand and said, "Well, I guess we're starting with the windows." By the next morning, people began appearing. Part of me was grateful and part of me wanted to say I could do it myself. But my father had helped people without making them small. If I rejected all of it, I would be rejecting the very life Earl had built. Before the pumps worked, before the sign was fixed, the coffee came back. A retired school bus driver came in and told me Earl used to keep peppermint candies for children who got carsick on the mountain road. I found an old jar and bought peppermints the next day. That little jar made me cry when I put it on the counter. Not because candy matters so much, because memory had started becoming practice. When did Jesse Rowan come into the story? About a week after I decided not to sell. He arrived in a truck that sounded worse than mine. Young man, maybe in his 20s. He asked if I needed help with the service bay doors. I said I could not pay much. He said he was not asking for much, with grease on his sleeve, and that careful way of standing people have when they are not sure they are welcome. But Jesse did not push. He just pointed at the track above the bay door and said, "That roller is wrong. It'll keep catching until you replace it." He stood still, watched the door move, listened to where it caught, and fixed the problem. My father used to say, then he named the part without looking it up. When he worked, he listened. He did not bang around trying to prove he knew things. Young mechanics often want to be louder than the engine. Jesse was not loud. He was patient. Later I learned there was more to his story, but that first week, he was just a young man who knew machines and needed somewhere to be useful.